Today's class is about a verb to describe a subject. We will start to study about the definition of a verb. The first definition of a verb is to describe an experience of a subject. The experience is complete at the point in time when a speaker declares that the experience that is gone through by the subject more than once for a period. The experience indicates several things that a subject more than once for a period. The completion of the experience is determined with the point in time that the speaker declares that the experience is expired. For example, I have greeted you. The object which is had by the speaker. The completion of the experience at the present does not exist because the verb have is intransitive. There is a verb have. The intransitive verb have is applied in a clause that the speaker declares on experience is expired, is complete. The definition of the intransitive verb is not conveyed to an object that is visible, that can be sensed. This clause is about the experience of the speaker who has a period of time. The period of time is the premise that the speaker exists. Because the speaker exists at a point in time and a place, this clause can be stated. So, the object of the intransitive verb have is not stated, but we have to be aware that the speaker spent a period of time until present. The adverb greeted describes the period of time. The speaker spent a period of time, and the adverb greeted describes how the period. We can summarize that the experience is how we react to the period of time. The past participle greeted the experience of a subject is a way to respond to the period of time. The subject this clause is about an action of greeting that happened or happens in a period of time more than once. The second definition of a verb is to describe a condition of a subject. A condition of a subject is a description about the surrounding of the subject on the premise that the subject exists in a point in time and a place. To be surrounded in an environment, the subject should exist. Of the subject starts from the inner state The range of the condition starts from the description about the subject, because the surrounding of the subject starts from the existence of the subject. The subject exists at a point in time and in a place. Then the surrounding started to be with the subject. The existence of the subject is the primary condition of any condition. From the existence of the subject, the range of the condition reaches out to the description about how the subject is, what the subject is, in a case that the subject is a person, who the subject is. The simplest clause to describe the condition of the subject is stated in the first exemplary clause, I am. This clause describes that the speaker exists in a point in time and a place. This clause is about the speaker himself as a subject of the existence. The information about the fact that the subject exists in the point in time and the place is not stated by a word or a phrase, but is necessary for the speaker to proceed with the further statement. The second exemplary clause describes who the subject is with the subjective complement a student. This clause describes who the speaker is with the phrase of a noun, a student, on the premise that the speaker exists in the point in time and the place. After the speaker and the listeners are aware that the speaker as a subject exists, the speaker describes the condition of the speaker. The speaker not only exists, but also is in a condition indicated by the phrase of the noun of student. The third exemplary clause is about how the subject is with the description by the subjective complement happy. This clause describes how the speaker is on the premise that the speaker exists in a point in time and a place. The condition of the speaker starts from the spirit, inner state, and reaches out to the surrounding environment of the speaker. So, the adjective happy describes the condition of the speaker with the description about the spirit. The adjective happy describes the subject of the clause. The subject is the speaker. And the adjective happy as a subjective complement describes the spirit, the inner state of the speaker. The first exemplary clause is about the condition of the listeners. With the first, second, and third exemplary clauses, we describe the condition of the subject with the be-verb. In this first exemplary clause, the verb, the intransitive verb, lu, describes the condition of the subject, the listeners. This clause describes the condition of the listeners with the adjective good, on the premise that the listeners exist, because the fact that the personal pronoun you indicates the listeners means that the listeners exist. Compared to the be-verb, to describe the existence of the subject. This clause describes the condition of the listeners without the primary premise that the listeners exist. The reason why the clause does not describe the existence of the listeners is that to indicate the listeners with the personal pronoun you means the listeners exist already. Because the listeners exist, the listeners can be indicated by the personal pronoun you. With the first, second, third, and fourth exemplary clauses, we can understand the statement is on the premise that the subject exists in a point in time and a place. The premise is abbreviated many times, but the listeners, we have to be aware that the clause is on the premise. The third definition of a verb is about an action of a subject. An action of a subject is a visible movement of the subject. There is an exemplary clause with the transitive verb drink. I drink a cup of water. This clause describes the action of the speaker on the premise that the speaker exists in a point in time and a place. We can figure out that the definition of the verb, of the transitive verb drink, is conveyed to an object indicated by the phrase of a noun, a cup of water. With the transition of the definition of the transitive verb to the object, the intention of the speaker in this clause is fully conveyed. With the transitivity of the verb drink, the object indicated by the phrase of a noun, a cup of water, get the definition of the transitive verb drink and finish the interaction with the subject, the speaker, the subject, the speaker, and the object indicated by the phrase of a noun, a cup of water, come back to the initial state. The initial state is without the interaction between the subject and the object. The definitions to describe a subject describe every phase of a subject. The serial by verbs from an experience, a condition, an action. The subject arrives at a new initial state, at a state who is about to start a new experience. So we can think that the series of an experience, a condition, and an action forms a viewpoint of a subject that is applied in a new experience. The circulative description by the verbs. The verbs describe various phases that a subject encounters and passes through in the circulative structure that is continued after the cycle of on experience, on condition, on action, which becomes the past experience to form a viewpoint, to influence a new experience. From now on, we will study about the roles of a verb in a clause. There are 4 roles of a verb in a clause. The first role of a verb in a clause is as a constituent of a clause. There are 4 constituents of a clause: a subject, an object, a complement, and a phrase of a verb. A verb consists of a phrase of a verb. Adverbs to describe the verb in the phrase of a verb. A verb consists of a clause with a subject. A subject and a verb are the premise that the series of words can be considered as a clause. A subject and a verb are minimal necessities. The second role of a verb is the presentation of tense. The tense refers to a difference of 2 points in time. The first standard to compare the other point in time is the present. The present is the standard. A verb reveals the tense that signifies the difference of the point in time between the present when the speaker says the clause and a point in time when the definition of the verb happens. So the present is important because the speaker and the listeners communicate in a conversation of the present. That's the reason why the present is the standard to judge the tense of the clause. And the other point in time to compare with the present, the conversation between the speaker and the listeners happened, is that the definition of the verb happens. The type of tense is classified into 3. The simple tense, the progressive tense, and the perfect tense. The speaker point that the progressive tense and the perfect tense conveys the intention of the speaker to emphasize the definition of the verb. First of all, the simple tense is also classified into 3. The past simple tense, the present simple tense, and the future simple tense, which is judged by the degree of accordance about how close the point in time is with the present. The simple tense, a point in time, as an object of comparison with the present. The speaker who applies the simple tense in a clause considers the duration of the time as a point. The point of time is subjective. The speaker. We will study about the simple tense from the past simple tense to the future simple tense. We will deal with the progressive tense and the perfect tense. First, the past simple tense signifies that the definition of the verb happened at a point in the past compared to the present when the speaker says a clause with a specific form of the verb. The speaker in the past simple tense means the speaker deals with an experience, a condition, or an action happened. So the speaker signifies the difference, the present that the speaker says the clause, and the experience, condition, or action with the form of the verb. The form of the verb to reveal that the clause deals with the past experience, condition, or action is different with the form of the verb stated with the present tense. For example, there is a clause. I ate a bowl of salad. There is a transitive verb, ate, whose form is converted to fit into the past simple tense because the original form of the verb in the present tense is eat. We can notice that this clause describes the past action of the speaker with the form of the verb ate. Second, the present simple tense signifies that the definition of the verb happens and at the same time with the present when the speaker says the clause with the original form or the converted form of the verb to reveal the number of the subject and whether the subject is a participant in the conversation with the speaker. The present simple tense is applied in a clause that the speaker describes the present, a concurrent experience, condition, or action with the point in time that the speaker says the clause at the present. The point is that is the time when the conversation happens. The speaker and the listeners are conscious about the subject of the clause. The consciousness about the subject is revealed in the form of the verb. The speaker and the listeners are more conscious about the subject, who is the participant in the conversation. So, the speaker reveals that the subject of the clause is the participant in the conversation with the original form of the verb. The speaker and the listeners in the conversation are conscious that the subjects that are plural are important than the singular subject, that the number of the subjects are plural and the subject is a participant in the conversation with the speaker and the listeners, or there is an exemplary clause. I ate a bowl of salad. This clause is about the speaker. The speaker is a participant in the conversation. So the transitive verb eat stays in its original form. Before we start to deal with the future tense, we will study about the present tense to describe the future experience, condition, or action. As we know, there are certain that are to happen in the future. We are so sure about the happening of the experience, condition, or action, like the experience, condition, or action the equivalence of the certainty of the present and the future experience, condition, or action makes the speaker state the clause. The present simple tense is also applied in a clause to signify that the definition of a verb certainly happens in the future. There is an exemplary clause. The earth revolves around the sun. The speaker assures that the action indicated by the transitive verb revolves happens in the future. So, the exemplary clause is stated in the present tense. Compared to the future experience, condition, or action stated in the present tense, the uncertain experience, condition, or action are expected to happen in the future is stated in the future tense. The future tense implying the uncertainty about the happening is stated with the will. The clause stated in the future tense is with the modal verb will. The modal verb will describes the verb. One of the adverbs, modal verb describes the verb in a phrase of a verb, in a clause. One of the modal verbs, will, also has the trait of the noun, which means expectation. So, the speaker who expects the experience, condition, or action described by the verb to happen in the future applies the word will, the trait of the adverb as a modal verb to describe the verb. The future simple tense signifies the uncertainty of the definition of the verb to happen in the future with the description of one of the adverbs, a modal verb will, ahead of the verb. There is an exemplary clause. Tomorrow will be better than today. The modal verb will describes the be-verb. The be-verb describes the condition of the subject indicated by the noun tomorrow. With the description by one of the adverbs, the modal verb will, the definition of the be-verb, is not true in the present. The description by the modal verb reveals that the definition of the verb the fact that the modal verb describes the definition of the verb The modal verb will also has the trait as a noun with the definition of the expectation. This definition as the trait of a noun remains to one of the adverbs. Modal verb will. So, this clause can be understood as a clause to convey the expectation of the speaker toward the actualization of the definition of the be-verb. The past, present, and the future point in time compared with the present in a simple tense can be said as a short period of time, like a second, or as a long period of time, like a year. The speaker determines the point in time. The point in time can be a short period of time, like a second or a minute, or a long period of time, like a year. This is the point. The speaker applies the progressive tense in a clause. For example, I blink my eyes. I describe my action indicated by the verb blink in the present tense. I don't blink. I blink my eyes. So, describe my action to blink with the present tense. The speaker who wants to emphasize that an experience, a condition, or an action lasts for a period of time on the premise that the subject exists applies the progressive tense. The progressive tense consists of a be-verb to set the premise that the subject exists in a condition, and a present participle as an adverb to emphasize that the experience, condition, or action of the subject lasts for a period. So, we can notice that the progressive tense describes the condition of a subject. The simple tense describes an experience, a condition, or an action of a subject, but the progressive tense always describes the condition of the subject because the period of time is on the premise that the subject exists. The existence of the subject is described by the be-verb to consist a phrase of the verb applied in the progressive tense. There is an exemplary clause. I am praying that everyone is happy. The be-verb describes the existence of the speaker, and the present participle praying describes the condition of the speaker with the condition. The original form of the present participle praying is the verb pray. The transitive verb pray describes a condition of the existing speaker. So, the present participle as an adverb describes the condition of the speaker. This clause is stated in the progressive present tense because the be-verb describes the existence of the speaker and the present participle praying describes the condition of the speaker. The present participle praying has the trait of the adverb to describe the definition of the be-verb, with the emphasis on that the condition of the speaker lasts for a period. We can notice that the form of a verb with ing at the letter of the verb means that the definition of the verb lasts for a period. When the converted form of the verb with the ing functions as a noun, the converted form of the verb with letters ing is called as a gerund. When the converted form of the verb with three letters ing is applied as an adverb or an adjective, the converted form of the verb with three letters ing is called as a present participle. The converted form of the verb with three letters ing is that the definition of the original form of the verb lasts for a period. The perfect tense is applied in the clause to describe the experience of a subject. To make the definition of the past participle happen more than once. The point is that the experience refers to an experience, a condition, or an action happened or happening more than once. The speaker who describes the definition of the past participle happened more than once should state about the entire period to include every experience during the period from the point in time when the initial experience starts to the point in time when the speaker declares the last experience ends in the clause. Inevitably indicates a period of time. So the speaker to state a clause in the perfect tense sets the premise to deal with the period. There are two exemplary. The first one and the second one are stated with the different past participle gone and been. The transitive verbs go and be are converted to the past participles gone and been to describe the intransitive verb have, to describe the experience of the speaker in each clause stated in the present perfect tense. In the first exemplary clause, the past participle gone describes the period of time, and in the second exemplary clause, the past participle been describes the period of time of the speaker. The speaker describes the experience that the speaker acts with the orientation toward the object indicated by the noun Paris more than once until the present, when the speaker declares that the experience is complete. The root form of the past participle gone is that the verb go. The definition of the intransitive verb go describes an action. The listeners can think of the experience of the speaker moving on a way like one of the transportation toward the object with this clause. In the second clause, The past participle being describes the intransitive verb have. The past participle being describes the form of the past participle being is the be-verb to describe the existence of a subject. This clause is also about the existence of the speaker for a period. The speaker describes the experience that the speaker ever exists with the orientation toward the object indicated by the noun Paris more than once until the present, when the speaker declares that the experience is complete. The reason why the two exemplary clauses deal with the orientation toward the same object indicated by the noun Paris is the preposition to. The subject of the preposition to orients to an object of the preposition. Compared to the first exemplary clause, this clause conveys more inclusive intention because the existence of the speaker is the primary premise of the action indicated by the listeners can think of the existence that the speaker with a static or kinetic condition orients to the object. The third exemplary clause, I had been in Seoul, present. But the experience dealt with in this past perfect tense is declared to be completed. The point in time that the speaker declares the experience is complete is revealed with the intransitive verb had. The first and second exemplary clauses are declared by the speaker at the present when the conversation with the speaker happens. This third exemplary clause deals with a period of time from the far point in the past to the close point in the past. So the completion of the experience of the speaker has the gap with the point in time that the speaker who declares the experience of the subject from the past point in time to the close past point in time. At the close past point in time signifies that the experience is finished at the close past point in time with the form of the intransitive verb had. The speaker states this clause in the past perfect tense. The role of a verb is that the verb presents the number of the subject and the role of the subject in the conversation with the speaker. The speaker reveals the information about the number of the subject and the role in the conversation because the speaker is aware that the listeners assign the different importance of the experience, condition, or action according to the subject. The listeners who get the various information from the conversation with the speaker have to accept the important information selectively, consistent with the priority. The priority of the subject is determined with the number of the subject and the role of the subject in the conversation with the speaker. So, the speaker who considers the listeners signifies that the clause conveys the relatively less important information with the listeners have to arrange the information from the most important information to the least important information. The conversation with the speaker. So, the speaker signifies the most important information because the plural number of the subject or the participants in the conversation with the speaker and the listeners, or this means that the speaker prioritizes the plural subject who are the participants in the conversation with the speaker. The subjects who are not participants in the conversation with the speaker. The singular subject who is the participant in the conversation with the speaker. These are 3 cases out of 4 cases. The 1 out of 4 cases that the subject is singular and is not the participant in the conversation with the speaker. The clause that is considered to convey the important information is a clause whose subjects are plural or participants in the conversation with the speaker. The form of the verb in this clause stays within the original form of the verb. For example, there is a clause, the birds visit a park. The subjects of this clause are plural, so the form of the verb to describe the present action of the subject are indicated by the verb visit. The clause that is considered to convey relatively less important information is a clause whose subject is singular and not a participant in the conversation with the speaker. The subject should meet the 2 necessities, and the verb signifies the subject. Satisfied the 2 necessities. The form of the verb in this clause is converted with the added sound of s at the latter part of the verb. There is a clause. The verb visits a park. The number of the subject indicated by the phrase of noun, the bird, is singular, and the subject indicated by the phrase of noun, the bird, is not a participant in the conversation with the speaker and the listeners. So the form of the verb visit has the additional sound of s at the latter part. Visit The reason why whether the number of the subject is 1 or not is signified is that the concept of the majority and the minority is made from the 3 subjects, adding 1 to the 2 participants of the conversation, the least number of the listener and the speaker. When a speaker communicates with the least number of the listener at the present, the person who did not participate in the conversation can participate in the conversation with the speaker and the only listener. From the point of the participants are 3, the 2 participants can make an agreed opinion. The reason why whether the subject is the participant in the conversation or not is that the information about how the subject of the experience, condition, or action is related to the speaker and the listeners is a factor for the listeners to assign the importance of the clause with the information. The Be-verb especially signifies the participant in the conversation as the speaker, the listeners, and the non-participant. Compared a general verb, participant, or the non-participant, the Be-verb, the participants into the speaker and the listeners as well. The Be-verb signifies that the clause describes the existence of the speaker, which is the premise of the experience, condition, or action of the speaker as a subject with the form of the Be-verb am. One of the forms of the Be-verb am notifies the listeners that the clause conveys the essential information about the existence of the speaker who leads the conversation. The Be-verb am signifies the clause about the speaker is important because the speaker leads the conversation with the listeners. The subject of the experience, condition, or action in the past or future is not a participant in the present conversation. The past and the future are not the time when the conversation with the speaker happens. This is obvious that the phenomenon that the speaker in the present does not even consider to be the same as the speaker in the past. The speaker himself does not consider the past speaker same as the present speaker. The speaker in the past is considered to be a non-participant in the present conversation with the listeners because the speaker in the past is considered to have the possibility to choose or not to choose to actualize the past experience to cause the present condition because the speaker obtains the new perspective after a cycle of the past experience, condition, and action. The speaker in the past chose an experience, a condition, or an action. That's the present condition. So the speaker in the possibility to choose an option to cause the present condition. So the speaker in the present is the non-participant in the conversation with the speaker at the present. This can be understood with the accorded form of the be-verb was to describe the existence of the speaker and the non-participant in the past. There are two examples. The first one is that I was happy. And the second one is that he was happy. The be-verb was describes the existence of the speaker in the past and the existence of a male who is not a participant in the conversation with the speaker. The listeners do not assign the highest importance to the clause to describe the past or future point in time because the subject is not the participant in the present conversation with the speaker. So, the general verb, which is not the be-verb, has the accorded form irrelevant to the subject. There are three examples. The first one is that I gave you a hint. The second one is that you gave him a hint. The third one is that he gave you a hint. We can find the tendency that the form of the general verb does not reveal the information of the subject, who is not the participant in the present conversation. You can think like that. The experience, condition, or action in the past is mentioned in the present because the experience, condition, or action is important. The speaker who gives the higher priority to the definition of the verb rather than the subject described by the verb does not reveal the information about the subject in the form of the verb. This tendency to these clauses as well. The action indicated by the general verb gave in the past is prioritized by the speaker. The be-verb in the clause stated in the past tense conveys the primary definition that the subject existed in the past. The premise that the speaker indicates a subject with a noun or a pronoun is that the subject exists. So the speaker reveals not only that the subject existed in the past with the be-verb, but also the number of the subject for listeners to assign the different importance on the clause. There are two examples. The first one is that he was. The second one is that they were. The speaker who mentions about the past existence of the subject gives the priority on the number of the subject because the fact that the subject indicated by a noun or a pronoun premise that the subject existed. But with the description by the be-verb, the listeners can assign the proper importance on the singular subject, the plural subject. The fourth role of a verb is presenting the transitivity. Transitivity is the characteristic of a descriptive word to link a subject and an object relationship to convey the definition of the description from the subject to the object. We've studied about the transitivity of a verb on the very first class with the object. Not only a verb has the of the transitivity. The descriptive word originated from has the transitivity as well. A verb with the transitivity is a transitive verb. A verb without the transitivity is an intransitive verb. The fact that the definition of the verb transited to an object is that the object gets the definition of the verb from the subject and the object finishes the interaction with the subject so that the subject and the object go back to the initial condition without any interaction between each other. There is a clause, I drink a cup of water. The action indicated by the transitive verb drink is complete with the transition from the speaker as the subject to the object indicated by the phrase of the noun a cup of water. So the verb drink is the transitive verb that has transitivity. Without the completion of the object indicated by the phrase of a noun, a cup of water, getting the definition of the verb drink, the definition of the verb drink is not finished. The interaction, the subject and the object goes on. There is a clause. We are students. The definition of the be-verb to describe the condition of the subject is complete without the transition from the subject. The condition of the subject does not need to be stated with the object to be given the definition of the be-verb because the condition of the subject is not finished with the transition. The completion of the transition by the object means that the definition of the verb is finished and invalid. So the be-verb is an intransitive verb that does not have the transitivity. The condition of the subject described by the be-verb does not need any object. The fact that the condition of the subject transited to an object is the condition of the subject finished the object, but the condition of the subject valid. The condition of the subject without the transition of an object. So the be-verb is an intransitive verb. The transitivity revealed in the clause in the perfect tense or in a passive voice. The transitivity of a verb refers to a characteristic of a verb to convey the definition of the verb to an object. In a perfect tense and a clause in a passive voice, the descriptive word remains to have the transitivity. The first exemplary clause is that Jesus Christ has offered many chances to choose gratitude. This clause is described in the perfect tense. The past participle offered has the transitivity to convey the definition of the verb offer the past participle offered is converted from the verb offer, the subject has the period of time, and the past participle offered describes how the subject responds to the period of time with action indicated by the verb offer. The form of the past participle offered describes how the subject responds to the period, and the transitivity of the definition of the verb offer remains to give the definition of the verb offer to the object indicated by the phrase of many chances. So the past participle is converted from the verb offer to reveal the perfect tense to describe the experience of the original form of the past participle as a verb remains the transitivity of the definition. So the transitivity of the past participle follows the transitivity of the verb. The past participle offered to describe a period of the experience has the transitivity to convey the definition of the transitive verb offer that the past participle offered originates from. The past participle offered is a way for the subject to respond to the period that the experience lasts. In the perfect tense, the period that the experience lasts is the subject, and the way described by the past participle is the object. This can be understood with us to set a timer to move at a specific point in time. The past participle offered So, the object indicated by the phrase of the noun, many chances to choose gratitude, get the definition of the past participle offered. The second exemplary clause is that I am sent the heavenly bliss from the Reverend instantly when I choose to be grateful. This clause is described in the passive voice because the past participle sent describes the condition of the speaker who's got the action indicated by the verb send. The point is that the past participle sent remains to convey the definition of the verb send to an object indicated by the phrase of noun, the heavenly bliss. This clause in the passive voice is stated in the active voice like this. The Reverend sends me the heavenly bliss when I choose to be grateful. The subject of this clause is the Reverend, and the direct object who gets the definition of the transitive verb sends is indicated by the phrase of noun, the heavenly bliss. And the indirect object who gets the definition of the transitive verb sends from the subject is indicated by the personal me. So we can figure out 3 subject and 2 objects. The subject gives the definition of the transitive verb send to the direct object firstly, and then the indirect object lastly. The exemplary clause number 2 is the point of view in the indirect object. In a clause with the different perspective, in a different narrative to describe this interaction from the subject to the indirect object via the direct object is the same. So the subject, the referent, gives the definition of the transitive verb send to the direct object and then the indirect object. In the class of active voice, the description is like this. But with the description from the point of view in the indirect object, the definition of the verb send is conveyed also to the indirect object. The past participle sent describes the condition. The speaker gets the definition of the verb sent from the past participle sent describes the transition of the transitive verb send from the direct object to the indirect object. The direct object is converted as an object of the subjective complement sent. The object, the heavenly place, is an object which gets the definition of the past participle sent. The subject and the object relationship between the subject, I, and the object, the heavenly place. The definition of the past participle sent describes the interaction from the past participle sent conveys the definition of the transitive verb sent to a subject and an object of the clause which the past participle sent originates from. This clause in a passive voice describes the 3 relationships among an object indicated by the phrase of the noun, the referent, an object of the subjective complement indicated by the phrase of the noun, the heavenly place, and a subject indicated by the personal pronoun I. There are triangular interactions between 3, right? The clause in the active voice describes the definition of the verb send conveyed from the subject to the indirect object via the direct object. The point is that each object is conveyed the definition of the transitive verb sent from the subject, the referent. The past participle sent in the clause that stated in the passive voice in the perspective of the speaker describes the two relationships between the subject and the indirect object and between the direct object and the indirect object. This phenomenon is caused by the dual transitivity of the verb send. The fact that the definition of the transitive verb send is conveyed from the direct object to the indirect object according to the transition from the subject is revealed obviously in the clause stated in the passive voice. The fact that the relationships between the subject and the object remain the same in the different perspective to state the clause. The past participle sent describes the speaker in a condition with the be-verb to get the action sent from the object indicated by the phrase of the noun, the referent, and the speaker to get the object indicated by the phrase of the noun, the heavenly bliss, which is the object of the subjective complement sent. A verb is applied as a transitive verb, an intransitive verb, or both the transitive verb and an intransitive verb. A verb start is applied in a clause both as an intransitive verb and a transitive verb. There are two examples. The first one is that a class starts. The second example is that a class starts an innovation. The definition of the verb starts is not conveyed to an object. The condition of the subject indicated by the intransitive verb starts, completes, and comes back to the initial state without an object. So, the verb starts is applied as an intransitive verb. The definition of the verb starts is not conveyed to an object. The definition of the verb starts with a motivation, like an appointed time, or another factor that is not described in this clause. The subject indicated by a phrase of noun, a class, is an object. So the subject indicated by a phrase of noun, a class, starts and ends the definition of the verb start. So the verb starts does not have the transitive. A class starts an innovation. The definition of the verb starts is conveyed to the object indicated by the phrase of the noun an innovation. The condition of the subject indicated by the transitive verb starts, completes, and comes back to the initial state with the definition transited to the object indicated by the phrase of the noun an innovation. So the definition of the verb starts from the subject of class and ends with object on innovation. We've studied about the definition of a verb and the roles of a verb. From now on, we will study about the search of a verb. There are two searches of a verb. The first one is general, and the other one is a be-verb. Let's start to study with the general verb. The general verb describes an experience, a condition, or an action of a subject in a clause according to the roles of the verb. The premise that the general verb describes the experience, condition, or action of the subject is that the subject exists. The fact that the subject is indicated by a noun or a pronoun, and the fact that the subject exists are in the relationship of necessity and sufficiency. In other words, that the noun or pronoun indicates a subject means that the subject exists, and that the subject exists means that the subject is indicated by the noun or pronoun. The subject indicated by a noun or a pronoun on the premise that the subject exists is described to exist by the general verb exist in a clause. For example, there is a clause, I exist. The speaker who wants to emphasize the fact that the subject exists, the existence of the subject with the verb, because the indication of the subject and the description about a subject are different. The preposition as classified as one of the adverbs forms the subject-object relationship with the object that is compatible with the subject to define what the subject is. We study about a preposition as preceded to the class about the adverb. The preposition makes a relationship between a subject and an object, like a verb. But the preposition does not connote the tense between the present and the definition of the preposition happens. In this point of view, let's take a look at the example. I exist as a student. There is a preposition as added to the exemplary clause of the first one. I exist, the description of the preposition to describe the relationship between the speaker as a subject and an object indicated by a phrase of noun, a student, is equivalent to define an object. The preposition as and the object of the preposition a student describe the subject, the speaker. So this clause describes a condition of a subject who is the speaker of this clause. In this clause, we have to notice that the definition of the general verb is the same as the description of the existence of the subject, right? We will compare this phenomenon with of the Be-verb. The general verb exist describes the existence of the speaker, and this clause describes the condition of the speaker with the subject, the speaker, and the object. A student. The Be-verb describes the existence of the subject as a general verb exists. For example, there is a clause, I am. The Be-verb am is one of the forms of the Be-verb to describe the present existence. In this clause, the Be-verb am describes the existence of the speaker, who is the subject. The definition of the Be-verb is changed, unlike the general verb, with the description about the subject by the subjective complement, the condition of the subject, with the subjective complement, what the subject is, who the subject is, or how the subject is. There is an example. You're happy. There is a subjective complement, happy, to how the subject, the listeners, are. In this clause, the definition of the Be-verb or is changed to describe the condition of the subject. The existence of the subject described by the Be-verb the general verb exists, whose definition is the same with the subjective complement, without the subjective complement. In this class, the phrase of the preposition as a student is the subjective complement to describe the subject, but the subjective complement describes the subject indirectly because the phrase of the preposition is a part of an adverb. So an adverb describes the description. The general verb exists, and the general verb exists describes the subject. So the phrase of the preposition describes the subject indirectly via the general verb exists. Compared to the clause with the general verb exists to describe the existence of the subject, the definition of the be-verb is changed from the existence of the subject to the condition of the subject. The clause with the subjective complement happy, this phenomenon can be understood with the fact that the be-verb has the trait of the adverb. The definition of the be-verb to describe the existence of the subject is changed to the condition of the subject with the adjective happy, how the subjects are. This phenomenon that the definition of the be-verb is changed can be understood with the fact that the be-verb has the trait of the adverb with the subjective complement. Let's study further about the trait of the adverb in the be-verb. The be-verb to include the trait of the adverb. The be-verb to describe the existence of the subject describes the condition of the subject because the be-verb specifies how the existence of the subject is. To obtain the trait of the adverb with the subjective complement happy. The examples are about the forms of the be-verb to describe plural subjects. The form of the to describe the existence of the subject are the be-verb to describe the speaker as a subject in the clause has the form of am. The form of the be-verb is describes the singular subject that is not a participant in the conversation with the speaker. The be-verb is a form of the be-verb to describe the existence of the singular subject that does not participate in the conversation with the speaker. From now on, we will study about the negative clause and the interrogative clause with the verb, general verb, or the be-verb. Before we start to compose a clause, a negative clause or an interrogative clause, let's start to study modal verbs did, do, does, and will. The definition of the modal verbs is this. The modal verbs did, do, does, and will describe the subject indirectly. To describe the definition of the verb with the way to emphasize the definition of the verb. I do finish my homework. In this exemplary class, the modal verb do, the definition of the verb finish, and the verb finish describes the subject as the speaker of the clause. The modal verb do describes the subject, the speaker, indirectly. The emphasis by the modal verb is a way to describe the description of the verb. So we can assure that the modal verb is a part of an adverb. The modal verb do emphasizes the fact that the definition of the transitive verb finish happens at the present. The modal verb did to present the past tense. The role of the modal verb did is to present the past tense. The modal verb did describes the general verb with an emphasis on the definition of the general verb to happen in the past. There is an exemplary clause, I did finish my homework. The modal verb did emphasizes the definition of the transitive verb finish happened in the past. The speaker who does not emphasize the definition of the verb finish in the past describes the verb with the verb finish it to reveal the past tense of a clause. But the speaker wants to emphasize the definition of the verb happened in the past. So the modal verb to indicate the tense with the modal verb did and the verb finish are separated. The general verb stays in its original form because the original form means the form of the verb in the present tense. The general verb stays in its original form because the modal verb did signifies that the definition of the general verb happened in the past when the conversation with the speaker did not take place instead of the general verb. The modal verb do or does to present the present tense to reveal the present tense, the number of the subject, and the role of the subject in the conversation. The modal verbs do and does describe the definition of the general verb with the emphasis on the definition of the general verb to happen at the present when the conversation with the speaker takes place. There is an exemplary clause. He does finish his homework. The speaker emphasizes that the definition of the transitive verb finish happens at the present when the conversation with the speaker happens. So the speaker separates the modal verb does to reveal that the subject is singular and a non-participant in the conversation, and the verb finish compared to the modal verb do to describe the plural subjects or the participants in the conversation. The modal verb does signifies that the subject is a non-participant in the conversation. The modal verb will to present the future tense has the role to reveal the future tense. The modal verb will describes the general verb and the be-verb whose definitions are supposed to happen in the future when the conversation with the speaker is not going to happen. There is an exemplary clause. She will finish her homework. The modal verb will describes and emphasizes the definition of the verb finish to happen in the future with uncertainty. So the speaker wants to express the expectation, the definition of the verb finish to happen. Because the modal verb will as a noun has the definition of expectation. The general verb finish does not signify the number of the subject and the role of the subject in the conversation with the speaker, because the modal verb will is applied in a clause with the be-verb. The modal verb will to present the future tense with the be-verb has a role to reveal the future tense as well. The modal verb will has a role to present the future tense. So the be-verb described by the modal verb will stays in its original form of the be-verb, be, not to signify the number of the subject and the role of the subject in the conversation with the speaker. There is an exemplary clause, everyone will be happy. The subject considered to be one is described with a be-verb described by the modal verb will. This clause is about expected future condition of the verb to convey the definition that is certain to happen in the future is stated with the present tense in the clause. Like this exemplary clause, the earth revolves around the sun. So the description with the modal verb will emphasizes that the definition of the verb is expected to happen in the future. From now on, we will study about constituting a negative clause with the general verb. First, the adverb not describes the modal verb to emphasize the definition of the general verb, so that the adverb not describes the definition of the general verb indirectly. There is an example. He does not open the door. The adverb not describes the modal verb, which is another adverb, does. Modal verb does described by the adverb not describes the transitive verb open. There is a reason for it. Let's consider about the opposite situation, that the adverb not describes the definition of the verb directly. Then the clause will convey the definition like a subject is a condition, indicated by the definition of the verb open. The clause conveys the vague condition except specific action is very vague. So the adverb not describes the modal verb does to emphasize the definition of the verb. The adverb not makes this clause convey the condition of the subject to be in a condition to remain in the closed condition, which is the opposite to the action indicated by the general verb open. Emphasizes the definition of the verb open, and the adverb makes the emphasized definition of the verb right opposite of the original definition. So we can think of the opposite condition of an emphasized action to remain in a static condition, which is much more specific than condition except an action. The adverb not to describe the definition of the general verb open conveys the vague intention that the condition of the subject is described as any condition except the action indicated by the phrase of the verb open the door. So The speaker avoids the constitution of a clause that the adverb not describes the general verb directly. To constitute a negative clause with the be-verb. Let's study about constituting a negative clause with the be-verb. The be-verb to describe the existence of the subject is described by the adverb not directly. The opposite definition of the clause to state that a subject exists is the only one, as that the subject does not exist. The opposite definition of the existence is only one, the non-existence. There is not any other option to convey the opposite intention except the non-existence of the subject. There is an exemplary clause. It is not. The adverb not describes the be-verb to describe the existence of the subject, and the clause with the adverb not describes the non-existence of the subject. The be-verb to describe the condition of the subject with the trait of the adverb conveys the vague intention with the direct description of the adverb not. The speaker intends to the vague intention is that the subject exists in a condition that is not indicated by the subjective complement. The fact that the subject exists is true, that cannot be denied, but the adverb not denies the condition described by the subjective complement. There is an exemplary clause. We are not living. So, the existence of the subject indicated by the personal pronoun we is true. The condition of the subject described by the subjective complement living to describe indirectly because the present participle living has the trait of an adverb is except the condition indicated by the present participle living. The be-verb described by the adverb not describes that the subject exists in a condition that is not indicated by the present participle living as the subjective complement. So the listeners can consider that the condition of the subject is any condition except the condition indicated by the present participle living. We can figure out that almost every clause in English is in the positive clause. The speaker conveys the intention with the positive clause without the adverb not to avoid the ambiguity. The phrase of the modal verb do not to describe the be-verb in the imperative clause. The imperative clause is in the urgent situation. The speaker conveys the imperative clause only to the listeners. The speaker is in an urgent situation, so the speaker abbreviates, indicated by the personal pronoun you. The imperative clause is supposed to be conveyed only to the listeners. There is an exemplary clause. Do not be sad. Don't be sad. I signify the abbreviated subject of the imperative clause with the be-verb in an imperative clause whose subjects are abbreviated because the clause is conveyed in the urgent situation and the subject are always the listeners is described by the phrase of the modal verb do not. Before we consider the effect of the adverb not to make this clause into the negative statement, let's consider the impact of the modal verb do to emphasize the definition of the, in this case, the verb is the be-verb. The modal verb do emphasizes a condition that the subjective complement set describes the subject. And the adverb not describes the subject to be in the opposite condition of the condition emphasized by the modal verb do. So, the existence of the subject, listeners, is the premise. And the modal verb do emphasizes the definition of the be-verb to describe the existence of the subject, the listeners. And then the adverb not describes into the opposite way. So the speaker conveys the intention to be in the opposite condition of the condition described by the subjective complement said. We will study about the interrogative clause. The interrogative clause conveys the intention of the speaker to ask the clause to the listeners. The speaker arranges a clause to start with the first word to notify the listeners about that the clause conveys the interrogative intention of the speaker. So the listeners can understand the interrogative intention of the speaker only with the first word and prepare the response. An interrogative clause with the general verb is with the modal verb did, do, does, or will. The speaker arranges the modal verb did, do, does, or will to emphasize the definition of the general verb as the first word to start the interrogative clause with the general verb. The modal verb did, does, do, or will reveals the information about the tense, and in the case the clause is described in the present tense, the number of the subject, and whether the subject is a participant in the conversation or not. Plus, the listeners can recognize that the verb of the interrogative clause is one of the general verbs. The modal verb will is applied to start the interrogative clause with the general verb, the be-verb. There are exemplary clauses. The first one is that, did you have dinner? The interrogative clause starts with the modal verb did to notify that the clause is about an experience, a condition, or an action in the past. The second exemplary clauses are these. Do you have dinner? Does he have dinner? With the modal verb do or does, the listeners can recognize that the interrogative clause is about the present experience, condition, or action. Plus, the listeners can recognize the number of the subject. The interrogative clause starts with the modal verb do, is about the plural subject or the participant. in the conversation. The listeners can recognize that the interrogative clause is about a non-participant in the conversation with the modal verb does. The third exemplary clause is about the future of a subject. The interrogative clause with the be-verb starts with the be-verb in the clause stated in the past tense, in the clause stated in the present tense. But an interrogative clause with the be-verb stated in the future tense starts with the modal verb will. The general verb. Because the be-verb has the trait of the adverb, the be-verb is arranged as the first word to convey the interrogative intention of the speaker, to wonder about the existence of a subject or the condition on the premise that the subject exists. There are exemplary clauses. The form of the be-verb, was or were, reveals the number of the subject existed in the past. So the speaker and the non-participant in the conversation, in the current conversation, is described with the form of the be-verb was. The plural subject existed in the past are described with the form of the be-verb were. As the example 1. The form of the be-verb to describe the present existence or condition of the subject differentiated with 3. The be-verb to describe the speaker as the subject is signified with the form am. The existence or condition of the plural subject is described with the form of the be-verb or. The existence or condition of the singular subject that is not a participant in the conversation is signified with the form of be-verb is. The example number 2 is about that. The be-verb to describe the existence of a subject in the future is described by the modal verb will. So the speaker arranges the modal verb will as the first word to start the interrogative clause with the be-verb, as the example number 1 does. The interrogative clause with the be-verb to describe the future existence or condition of a subject does not reveal the information about the subject. So the modal verb and the form of the be-verb, be, are same. A negative interrogative clause. The speaker who assures that the definition of the verb is true emphasizes the definition of the verb with the adverb not to describe the modal verb did, do, does, or will, or the be-verb to start the interrogative clause. There is a clause, isn't she healthy? The speaker who sets the premise that the subject, indicated by the personal pronoun she, is healthy. But the speaker constitutes the interrogative clause with the adverb not to empower the assurance with the agreement from the listeners. So the response to this interrogative clause signifies whether the definition of the verb without the emphasis by the adverb not is true or not. The to respond to this are these. Yes, she is. No, she isn't. The be-verb is a proverb to replace the predicate of the interrogative clause is healthy. So the positive response, yes, she is abbreviated from the clause, yes, she is healthy. The negative response to the question is abbreviated from the clause, no, she isn't healthy. To analyze the intention of the listeners we can figure out that this response confirms the condition of the subject accorded with the positive interrogative clause. This response, though she isn't, denies the condition of the subject accorded with the positive interrogative clause. Thank you for watching.